kommer. Du kan begynde at komme ind nu. Der er stadig kun én viewer, som der ser os.
Det er lidt som om nettet ikke er super stærkt her.
Ja.
Eller at væggene er meget tykke eller noget andet.
de har sådan en lort net her.
Nå, men det er jo i virkeligheden mit almindelige net, der nærmest ikke kan nå gennem væggene.
Okay. Nu er jeg blevet lidt forvirret. Jeg er altid nervøs for, at der er fået et eller andet galt her. Kender du det?
Men hvad kan gå galt?
Jamen, det er lidt det, men det er folk, de skal nemlig gå ind på det her link. Og så finde. Okay, det er rigtig faktisk begyndt at komme nu. Så selvfølgelig lidt skidt til.
Så jeg skal bruge til pakken.
Hvor vil du da holde op? Gud, det er noget fint.
Jamen, jeg kan bare se, hvor glat din pande er.
Nå.
Så bliver jeg jo nødt til ligesom at...
Ja. Welcome everyone. So I think people are dropping in. So the confusing thing is that you can see us, but we can't see you. But I've been told that you're out there. My name is Magnus Henriksen. I'm the National Director of Humanity in Action, and on my right side is...
I'm Lars Henriksen. I'm the Chairman and Festival Leader of Copenhagen Pride.
And it's such a joy to start this online course on gender and identity in the Global South. We're not going to talk so much about the Global South today, but we're going to sort of build up the framework of what this course is going to be all about. So the thing is, if you go to the left of your panel, up in the top box, you can see a blue thing that's called chat, and that means that you can write Q&As, questions for us, and then we can answer them as soon as we're done with our short presentations. We're going to try and do this as short as possible so that we can have as good and productive dialogue as possible. So just to briefly sort of give you a picture of why you were sitting and listening to two white men addressing you right now, is that for Humanity in Action and for me personally, it means a lot to be part of a minority. It's something that is part of my everyday. I'm a young gay man, still young.
Younger than me anyway.
Exactly. And I'm reminded about this in many instances of my life and everyday life. But when we talk about human rights, we must ask ourselves, and I think this is what many people do, are LGBT people or people with LGBT background, are they a protected group within the human rights, doctrine? And as such, they're not. But that's something that's a discourse or a narrative that a lot of people who are against LGBT people and their agenda, they're saying. However, I would claim that I would just like equal rights. I would just like to be treated as everyone else, which means that I'm not discriminated against because of my gender, because of my sexuality, and because of who I am and who I love. And for me, that's the core of human rights. And I think that's what people all across the world, when they talk about gender and identity, when they talk about LGBT, that's what they're fighting for. They're fighting for the ability to be who they are, to love who they are. And so it's not as a question about claiming special rights. It's actually a question about claiming the rights that we have and the rights that every person should have to simply be themselves, and especially not to be discriminated against for who they love and who they are and what gender they would like to have. When I'm bringing up gender a lot, it's because a realization for me has been the issue of transgenders, or people who are transgender, and it's something that we don't talk so much about in Denmark. And I think it's actually kind of sad that I don't know much more about it, which I honestly don't. But the more I read into it in Denmark, and the way that I think that we're somewhat progressive compared to some other countries, I realize that we are not that progressive on this issue. Because I do understand that you can be born to and feel like you're in another body, or in the wrong kind of body compared to what you feel like. And I honestly think that that's something that has to be of your own choice. And when it matters to Humanity in Action, when gender and identity matters to Humanity in Action, it is really because we're against every sort of uniformity when it comes to single-mindedness, or uniformity that means that we can only think of one idea or have one perception of what, for instance, a relationship should be of, or identity exactly. Because I believe that we are plural. As a human being, we are extremely plural. Yes, I'm gay, but I don't think that has much to do with my work. On my work, I'm something else. But I'm also gay while I'm working. And I'm also gay while I'm working out. And I'm also...
Which he does a lot more than me.
True. But it's so you can be so many things during your day. And if we only allow ourselves to be one thing, then I think we strip ourselves of the most beautiful thing about being human, which is that we're so many more things than what these small little boxes that we can tick off is all about. And so today, we're going to talk a little bit more about that, and I'm going to ask Lars to talk about what Copenhagen Pride does and how they envision gender and identity, or how they perceive gender identity in Copenhagen. And then we're sort of going to open it up to you. But I would just like to bring it back a little bit, because the reason why we're doing this again, this project and this online course, is for you to sort of think about what gender and identity, but also perhaps sexuality, if you dare, means in your own community, in your country, whatever background you have, nationally, ethnically, religiously. Because I think if we can't come to grasp and can't include each other, and the pluralism that each of one of us have, then I think that we're failing each other, and we're failing the man or the woman or whoever next to one another. And that's why this is so important for us. So Lars, tell us something about Copenhagen Pride. And
well, first of all, I think we should start by talking about a little bit about what is LGBT. It's an international expression, an abbreviation of lesbian, gay, bi, and transgender. And in saying that, we're also in a way talking about two different things, namely groups that are linked because of their sexual their sexual preferences, and a group that has come into the LGBT family or LGBT environment through their gender identity. So in many ways, we are a construct, but a construct that works together because we work with sexual and gender diversity as our sort of common base. And having said that, Copenhagen Pride is an NGO, a non-government organization that works to promote human rights for LGBT people. And I agree completely with Magnus when he says that there is no such thing as LGBT rights. We don't ask for special rights. We ask to be acknowledged as equal, and thereby be given, granted the same rights as everybody else. So there's no such thing as LGBT rights. They're just human rights, and they should apply to everybody, be they LGBT or not. When I am asked to describe what is Copenhagen Pride with very few words, there are two words that are completely at the core of our festival. One of them is that we're a visibility festival. We are a festival that is aimed at showing the diversity and the variation within the LGBT community. And thereby we try to fight stereotypes, because being a minority, as LGBT people are, often because people may not know an LGBT person, or they know only very few, they tend to stereotype people from their own experience or lack of experience. So by bringing out a diversity of different ways of being LGBT into the streets of Copenhagen, we hope that we can create an understanding in the broader community that we are as diverse a group as everybody else. And the other core of our festival is that we're an inclusive, or a festival built around inclusion. That not only do we want LGBT people to be included in the broader society, but we also want the city of Copenhagen, the Copenhageners, and the tourists, for that matter, to be included in our festival. We do this by being in a constant dialogue with organizations across Denmark, be it unions or corporate leader corporations and other NGOs, the municipality of Copenhagen, the regions around, the government, anywhere where we can create a dialogue about diversity and the right to live in accordance with your own wishes, personality, identity. And we're very happy to say that this has caught on in Copenhagen. Copenhagen is not the biggest city in the world. That's very important to know. In what we call Greater Copenhagen, which is a very great concept. If you talk about Greater Copenhagen, you talk about almost the entire island of Zealand, on which Copenhagen is situated, and the southern part of Sweden. And in that region, we're 3.9 million. But in Copenhagen as such, as a city, we're about, 1,200,000. And in the core of Copenhagen, we're 600,000. So for us to be able to bring out on Pride Saturday, when we have the parade through the city, because we have a festival that runs for a week with a very extensive human rights program, and on the Saturday we have a parade through the city, and we really create a party to celebrate what we have achieved during the years. On that day, on the Saturday, we've got 30,000 people marching and about 150,000 people watching the parade as spectators. So we've got about a third of the city's population taking to the streets, participating. And when we ask, because we've done that, when we ask people along the parade route, why are you here today? Are you here basically to watch people who are dressed up? And people say, no, we're not, this is not it. We're here because we want to support the values and the aim of Copenhagen Pride, to have a Copenhagen that is including, that is tolerant, that is accepting, that is that has a varied population as possible. And these are values that we want to support and join forces with. And I think that's incredibly important, because as a minority, be we LGBT or be we any other minority, the concept of being a minority is that you need allies. We would not, as the LGBT community, have been able to achieve anything had we not had straight allies along the way, because we're few. So it's incredibly important for us to build these connections and build these understandings with the society at large, and within our own community, because we as L and B, let's say L and G, lesbians and gays, are significantly more numerous than are the T's, for example. It's important that we build the same sort of alliances, that we as L and G's, lesbians and gays, work for the trans community, because they're an even smaller minority within the minority. And it's crucially important that we understand that we are equally responsible for their agenda as people have been for us. And having said that, that brings me to the international outlook or scope of Copenhagen Pride, because we have a strong international collaboration also. We work with other Pride organizations and other LGBT organizations across Europe and in Africa and Asia. And we try to bring them into our festival as part of our human rights program. And if they are not here, then at least to speak on their behalf, to sort of give a voice to those who have no voice at home, or to use the platform that we can provide to let people speak from there. Because human rights, be they LGBT or other human rights, are not exclusively national. They are border transgressional. So if I don't work for the human rights of somebody in a different country, I limit my possibilities as a person in the world also. So when I work for somebody else, be they in Uganda or Pakistan, as we've done this year, or Kenya, or in the Eastern Europe or wherever, I also work for myself. I work to make the world a safer place for me to live in, to travel in, to seek employment in. So it's, for me, completely it would be completely out of the question to not have a global outlook as a human rights and an NGO organization and NGO, because if I didn't, I would build the reservation Denmark, where I could then sit and be very complacent about myself and what we had achieved here. But I would, at the end of the day, have to stay here. For those of you who've been to Denmark, you know that that would not be the greatest vision for the rest of your life. You want to go elsewhere also. And it also, and that's very important to say, that not only do we then give voice and all this, what I just said, but we learn a lot. It is an educational experience out of this world for us also to invite people here to have this collaboration. It makes us better at doing what we do to get international perspectives on our own work. So yeah, at the end of the day, we all benefit.
Okay. So we're going to open the floor up for Q&A. We're going to start with just Lars and I talking. I have some small questions for him, but if you have some questions, please do not hesitate. Yeah, I thought of some.
I didn't prepare any.
No, I know. Please write them up and we'll get to them. Because Lars, you've been in this game for, game is the wrong word. You've been involved with this kind of activism for a long time. And if you were to sort of tell or talk to young people about what this means to you. I mean, is it about you being able to travel as you are, and has it developed over the years?
Well, first of all, it's not at all about me being able to travel. I'm sorry if it came out that way, but no. And not to be able to travel as an individual or as a part of an organization, that's not it at all. But it is crucially important for me because it is part of my life that I am a gay man and that I'm part of a minority. I can never outrun that. That is something I live every day of my life, as does many other people. And therefore, to not work to promote my own possibilities would be ludicrous in my perspective. I have to make sure that I improve conditions, not only for me, but the people who will come after me. This is a responsibility that we all have as human beings. And yes, things have improved. I mean, and in our part of the world, in Denmark and in the Scandinavian countries, we must say that we've come very far since the first national LGBT organization was founded in Denmark in 1958. That's a long time ago. It's one of the oldest in the world. Since that time, things have developed enormously. I mean, we've come from a time where being gay was criminalized, when dancing with somebody of your own gender, dressing in the clothes of the opposite gender was illegal, that there were different age of consent for gay people and straight people. And we've gone through this entire development where today we must say that within the jurisdiction, we are quite close to equality. There are still a few things that we need to deal with, but on the broader side of things, we are very close to being where you would want to be in terms of equality. But changing a law text doesn't change the mindset of people. So now what we have to do is infinitely more difficult, because you have to talk to each individual really and make them understand that because they think or assume or presume or feel offended by something I do that has no relevance in their lives, that should not mean that I should be limited in doing what I want to do. And this is a constant dialogue we have to be in with everybody in society. And in a way, it was so much more direct to go to Parliament and say this law is unjust, it's discriminatory, let's change it. And we then had to find 50% of votes who would support that, and we had it changed. And now I make it sound as if everything went really smoothly and well. There were a lot of lumps and bumps along the way, but that was in many ways a lot more simple. But now we have to take a much more complicated course where we deal with concepts and mindsets, and that's a more individual thing. You can't legislate your way out of that.
Another thing that came up when you were talking, and this is something that Humanity in Action is also struggling with, and I'm struggling with, is trying to, and a lot of you are young people watching today that may not belong to this issue, but actually feel sort of an urge to act on it. And you were talking about how to be an ally, and that's exactly what it means to be an ally, that you act on somebody else's behalf, that you speak up for them, that you voice your opinion, that you say no if you see something that you don't feel is right. From your chair, how should an ally, do you think there are any, could you give any advice to any young people that are sitting and listening, thinking, you know, how can I approach these people? Is there something that I should do? Because a lot of the times when we're doing projects like gender and identity, we were out on Danish high schools, you could see that they were so interested and they were so curious about these LGBT people from Uganda, from Kenya, from Pakistan. But they were also scared of being inconsiderate. But also, I think they young people nowadays, one of the greatest things are that they know what's wrong about the world. They are faced with it all the time, but I think it's really difficult for them to act on it. So how do you think they become good allies?
Well, first of all, you become a good ally if you decide what you will suffer, what you will take as an individual, not only on your own behalf, but also on other people's behalf. Because I'm absolutely certain that you're right when you say that people when they're confronted with somebody who's LGBT, are very considerate and very polite. But the struggle really is so much more when we're not in the room. When people say derogatory things about people who are different for any reason, that be it gender or sexuality or skin color or religion or whatever, but that you have sort of thought this through individually before the situation arises and decided what you will take and what you won't take, and then is not taken aback by the situation but steps in, that you're ready to step in when the situation arises and say, hey, I will not take this. I will not have this kind of talk in my house or in my workplace, or that you step in on the behalf of somebody on the metro or wherever you experience things that are not in compliance with these standards you've set for yourself. And I think that thinking it through beforehand makes it so much more easy for you to know when to step in and when not to, because we all know the situation where we've experienced something and only afterwards you sit and think it through and say, oh, I wish I had said, I wish I had done, I wish I had stepped in, I wish I'd been more prepared. And that preparation, I'm absolutely certain you can make mentally by deciding what is right for you and what is wrong for you, what you will take, what you won't take, what is relevant for you to deal with and irrelevant. So I think the most important piece of advice I can give to anybody will be to think yourself, your own set of values through. Yes.
Yeah, because that's also one of the things that we're going to do on Thursday when we have the activity hours. You're going to go into groups and you're going to talk about, what you thought about this talk, but also sort of, trying to make it more tangible from your own perspective and what you think about these issues in your local context. And it's also something that is really close to the heart of us in Humanities in Action, because we really want young people to go out and act. And I understand how difficult it can be when you're bombarded daily with badness and the illness of the world. So I was wondering something, Lars, when you were talking as well, and what struck me what struck me when we were doing the project was how amazing these. So you're going to experience these activists that's going to be on the case studies during this course, but how amazing they were, because you often think of the activists, or that they must suffer so much, and I was wondering, you were talking about that it was interesting in aspects of what we can learn from them. Are there any thoughts of what have you learned, and but also from previous instances and meetings, and the way that we have a very sort of closed, I would say a closed understanding that we are very progressive in Denmark, and probably also in a lot of European countries when it comes to LGBT issues. But meeting them has definitely made me understand that, I think we're, and some issues, falling off the wagon. What stood out for you?
One of the most important lessons I've learned is that it is simply not possible to export my understanding of the world to Africa, for example, or to Pakistan or Asia, for that matter. That if I try to impose my way of running my organization, my way of perceiving politics, my understanding of civil society on their reality, it will make absolutely no sense. So the first thing is to sit down and listen. So if we're to work together, first of all, I have to be open enough to get an understanding of the reality they live, because it is so alien. And to anything I've ever experienced. It's so different. It's so much more hostile. It's so much more violent. It's so much more dangerous. So I almost blush at calling myself an activist compared to these people who put themselves at risk every living hour of their lives, every time they leave their house, every time they go to the office, every time they speak up for their cause. They are genuinely putting their lives on the at stake. They're being harassed, attacked, beaten on the streets, denied access to health services. They are being bullied. They are being thrown out of their families, disowned. It is. And when we sometimes think, or I have to speak for myself, when working with groups from other parts of the world, when I've sometimes thought that things moved very very slowly, at a very slow pace compared to what I was used to, and that I know now is because I have not understood the reality they are in, and that sometimes what I think is easy is a complete obstacle in the context they're in. So I think the best lesson I've learned, especially because I've worked very closely with people from Uganda, is that they're incredibly brave and incredibly strong people. To do the work they do every day is exhausting beyond measure, and I admire them out of this world. With Pakistan, it's not a different story. I was going to say it's a completely different story, which it isn't. But what I've learned from their context is something a little bit different and very surprising, because we had 3 wonderful Pakistani transgender women here during Copenhagen Pride Week, and they come from, well, I believe Lahore in Pakistan, and the first thing they said when they arrived is, "Where are the transgender people? Why are they so anonymous in Copenhagen?" And later on, a couple of their friends have befriended me online, and they're homosexual men. And what I've learned is that they work with their issues, the homosexual issue, through the transgender community, which is completely reverse to what I'm used to here in Denmark, where we sort of lift and try to promote transgender issues through the homosexual community, because homosexuals have become a lot more mainstream in Denmark or in the Scandinavian or Western European context than are the transgender community, or is the transgender community. And it's the completely opposite in Pakistan, where the third gender has been recognized officially by the government, but at the same time, homosexuality is still illegal. So to have things sort of topsy-turvy in that way, that suddenly the whole concept of how you work with the same basic human rights is turned on its head, has been very eye-opening to me as well. Yes.
Excellent. I still don't see any questions. I hope it's not because you're sort of scared of asking any, or I hope it's also working.
I would like to say just one more thing. It is just because you said before something where this came into my mind. It's because the American ambassador to Denmark is a gay man, and he supports Copenhagen Pride and the LGBT community in Denmark a lot. And he said in a television interview something that I have always at the back of my head, and I think that's could be an inspiration for you guys as well. He said, "There is no fight that's for the good of the world that is not worth fighting." And that also means that whoever you are, wherever you are, there is a fight that is worth fighting for you. My fight is worth fighting, even though it can't compare to the fight that they're fighting in Uganda, but their fight is worth fighting. And if we join forces and fight together, I mean, empowering each other. But how little it may seem, how small it may seem, it's still worth it.
That's a good quote.
Yeah, I love
That's
it. I genuinely think that's one of the best quotes I've heard for a long time. And well, I don't know if it'll go over in history like something Gandhi said or whatever, but it was said by Rufus Gifford.
The Americans are really good at framing these things.
They are, yes.
Some of you who heard me speak at Læsø at the United World College short course, I'm afraid that you've heard a little bit about what I'm about to say. This is very interesting. Sorry, it's just Sarah Josephine from Canopy Lab. She's told me that there's so many questions, but I can't find them. This is horrible. Why?
Q&A. It says there.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
Oh,
We've missed them. Okay, we're gonna go. Okay. Let's start with the first one. I'm gonna read them out loud, then maybe you can answer. So the first question is, could you tell us something about asexuality as a term? Because I've seen a lot of people stereotype asexuals as cold people who never strive for things as such as romance and love just based on the fact that they don't strive for sex.
well, I from my limited experience, because the asexual community is not very strong in Denmark either, or very outspoken. But from my experience with the community, I would say that you have to understand that sexuality and the concept of love and romance are two completely different things. And being asexual doesn't mean that you don't want to be close to other people, that you don't want to be romantic with other people, that you don't want to form romantic relationships with people. It is mostly, or it is exclusively down to not being very interested in having sexual relations with other people. But I know from my own group of friends that that asexual people find it very meaningful to form relationships with each other, because then in that relationship there won't be the expectation of something sexual. So I think you have to sort of split the two things apart and say sexuality is one thing and romance and love is a different thing.
All right. So Sophie Anderson is asking two questions, I guess. She's starting off with saying, personally I identify as bisexual, but I cannot identify with the LGBTQ community because I feel invisible within the community. I don't feel as welcome. Oh my God, it's jumping. I don't feel as welcome as homosexual because I quite often pass as straight. My best friend, a transgender male, is going through the same thing. How is the diversity within the LGBTQ community really, and how to improve it? Can I say something?
Yes, absolutely.
So it's because when I came out, or I don't know if I ever came out in that sense, when I started going to the gay community in Odense on Fyn, a smaller island in southern Denmark, I came out as bi. And a lot of people that I met, they told me that, oh, bi is just something you are for a while, and then you go all the way. And I thought that to be so condescending and weird. And actually for many years that sort of scarred me. Also because, to be honest, I don't feel very how can you say this? I don't know how to act when I'm in a gay scene. And so this year was my first Pride. And that's what the reason. And actually, the first time I met Lars, I told him, I don't know if I told you exactly this story, but I somewhat told you that I've often had exactly the same issue of feeling that there was a community that I couldn't be part of. However, I must say one thing, that I think looking back that I was also very sort of vulnerable, and I think that I saw the LGBT community as one thing, and actually identified it a lot with George Michael because he had just been outed back then, And so, and I think I wasn't really good to actually listen to my parents and listen to the people that I knew within the community who actually told me that it was very diverse. But of course, Denmark is also small. But I don't know if you were to advise.
First of all, I would like to link up to what Magnus said at the last, and then I'll go back to the bisexual issue. I think that that is why, in my opinion, it's so important to have a visibility festival like Copenhagen Pride, where we show the diversity within the community. Because when you come from the country, as I did and you did, and you have a concept of LGBT from the media, and that can be very stereotypical. And when you come out, you feel that you have to live up to a certain set of expectations, which, and I know exactly the feeling that you're describing of not feeling that you fit in, because you were something different from that stereotype. So I think that the more people who come out, the more people who join in the parade, the more people who show that they are who they are, with the diversity that constitutes, is important, because there will be people along the route who will look at and find something that reflects their own sense of identity. As for the bisexual community, I think you have a point. It is one of the most difficult communities to activate, if I may use that word, within the community in active work. And I think that's because when a bisexual person is in a relationship with somebody of their own gender, they're perceived as either lesbian or gay, and don't maybe bother to make it known that I am also bisexual, because it can be also seen as preferring something that they're not at the moment, or that they are sort of not completely within the relationship they're in and wanting something else also. And when the same people are then in a relationship with somebody of the opposite gender, they, I think, sort of identify with the straight community and don't feel part of the LGBT community. And that means that this group, the B group, tends to become rather anonymous and difficult to spot, because they're either with one or the other group. I always say to people when we talk about Copenhagen Pride, and when people come up to me and say, "Hey, I don't feel represented in Copenhagen Pride. Why don't you show this or that, or why don't you take this debate up, or whatever?" That Copenhagen Pride is a framework, and within that framework, you help me paint the picture. So if you want something to be represented, we provide the basis for that, but you have to come and tell me what to do and how to do it, and I will help you any way I can. But you have to take responsibility. And I would love for the bi community in Copenhagen to come out more and to be more involved with Pride, to be more visible, and we will do anything we can to help. So if there's anybody out there, please call us, write us, come join, because the only goal we have is to show as much diversity and as big a variety of people and sexualities and gender identities as at all possible.
We have another question from Sampurna Gush. I'm sorry, I hope that I pronounced that correctly. Writes that, "Hey guys, I'm transgender male living in India. In the global south, the medical system is often unprepared to help transgender people. How can we change this?" And goes on to say, "I have a question about the term global south. What do you mean by this? Pakistan, for example, is in the northern hemisphere." I'm going to take the last question, perhaps. So the global south, you're absolutely right. In development studies, global south is primarily targeted Africa. And Africa was sort of the primary sort of, what can you say, case study for this project. However, when I came to realize that the transgender community in Pakistan, but also in India, is quite historically unique when you look at the world as such, and has a sort of a historically a tremendous value and culture and heritage. I thought that it would be simply wrong to leave it out, and also because I wanted to bring up transgender issues, and we couldn't really do that had we only been focusing on Uganda and Kenya. And I also thought that it was really sort of interesting that we brought in a perspective from a Muslim country. So I know that term doesn't really what can you say apply to it all, but it's also because in Denmark we think of. I think it's more appropriate to say the global south than, for instance, developing countries, because exactly on this issue, as Lars just said, we can't just apply these values and these terms as loosely as we've done so far. And I think for me to say that that Uganda is not developed is for me to also brand them and put me on a pedestal and say that I'm better on every issue, which I'm definitely not.
And you could say on equal rights for transgender people, Pakistan is infinitely far beyond Denmark. So we can learn a lot from there. So I mean, it's more putting them into putting our two groups into geographical categories rather than
But so to the first question about the medical system is often unprepared to help transgender people. It's first of all something that we're actually going to deal with much more in the case studies. I think you should ask this question to both the Kenyans and the Ugandans and the Pakistanis when they speak. But I mean, this is also a problem in Denmark.
It is absolutely, yes. Well, in Denmark, we had last year, about a year ago, 1st September 2014, a law was passed to legalize legal gender change, meaning that you didn't have to have surgery to change your gender. That, of course, was a great step forward and something that we'd fought for in a long time. But at the same time, politicians in parliament used that law to limit access to medical health enormously, so that your normal GP could no longer provide you with hormones and help you with your treatment, but that had to go through the National University Hospital in Copenhagen, who were given a monopoly on treating transgender people. And in order to be treated, you were to be subjected to psychiatric assessment, and thereby having to, or being compelled to, acknowledge that you were a psychiatric case. So it was in many ways a step forward, but on very significant things, it was also a step backwards. So even in Denmark, we are fighting very much to ensure that the medical system is prepared to help transgender people. But again, when you say the global south, I assume from what you said before that you also consider that to be Africa, and I'm absolutely with you. That is my experience also from my talks I've had with the Ugandans and the Kenyans, that there is no real framework to assist people with gender change, with hormone treatment, with therapy sessions, anything. There simply isn't that system set up. And people have to go abroad, or people have to provide it on the very insecure ways, in very insecure ways, having to finance it through working as sex workers, and that, of course, is absolutely not good enough, and something we have to try to deal with.
All right. So there are different people tuning in. I'm sorry that I've just realized that we have this Q&A that I was in the group chat, which I'm usually doing because we're so few speaking to each other. But Ida, for instance, is here from Croatia and says hi. Shane's Kilan, I think. I'm not sure if I said that right. Could ask if we could highlight 3 main statements, thoughts of today's sessions. Well, one I think is really important. That is that that human rights apply to LGBT people, and that LGBT people don't ask for special or unique rights. It's all about equal treatment and non-discrimination. From my share, I think the other one, which you struck upon, was how important it is to have allies, and for everyone to act and to become a good ally.
And thereby you're actually answering Sophia Anderson's question, who's asking, what are your thoughts on straight people within the LGBTQ community? Should they take part, or is it a safe place for the minority? Yes, absolutely, straight people should take part, because human rights is something that applies to us all. It's a common responsibility. And I should also not only fight for the LGBT community, but for other people's human rights also. Otherwise, we become very focused on things, and that's not helpful. We should have a broader perspective at all times.
And I think that might lead us to the third and final sort of statement, I guess, is how, just imagine how many opinions and perspectives there are in your school or in your classroom or in your local community. I mean, imagine how big that is in the world. And it is so wrong for us to think that we have the right perception of what a gender should be, or what identity or sexuality or whatever. For me, it's absolutely ludicrous that we go out and teach the world, or the rest of the world, how they should live. Like we've experienced throughout this project, it's been an immense joy to actually realize how they, so to say they, but how our guests from our project countries thought differently. Should we bring up Olivera? As transgender people are culturally more accepted in Pakistan than in Denmark, but this is mostly about trans women. While trans men are quite invisible in Pakistan as here. Oh, I keep forgetting to click on it. Yeah, I have to say select. Oh, right, yeah. And the 3 guests at Pride were trans women. Their issues are not always the same.
I agree with that completely.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, the whole trans issue is something that is at the very core of our concept of gender and identity. For men to want to assume the role of women, perceived men to want to assume the role of women, or for women to want to assume the role of men, is in many cultural contexts conflictual and something that is, I'm looking for the word here,
Frowned upon?
It's frowned upon. It's something that makes people aggressive. I'm looking for a different word, but no worries. So yes, and I do think that for gay men, or for what perceived men in some cultures to assume the role of women is more culturally acceptable, especially in cultures where men or the male gender is perceived as worth more than the female gender. Then you can accept somebody who will assume the inferior role, whereas allowing somebody from the perceived inferior role to assume that of the more valued is will create conflict. And I think that's also why transgender men are invisible in a context like Pakistan, because for a woman to assume the role of a man I should say I am absolutely not a scholar on Muslim culture at all, but I would assume that would be more conflictual. And the more gender equality the more gender equal a society is, probably the easier it is for a transgender man to be recognized also. But I will say that even in a context like the Danish, where genders are perceived as relatively equal in the workplace, in the families, and everything, still this is a huge issue and something that's highly debated, and where common concepts must be worked upon, because there is still a lot of discrimination even in the Danish context.
So Rose is asking a similar question regarding transsexuality in Pakistan. It kind of sounds like Thailand, where it's religiously recognized to feel like your sex and gender don't match. Out of curiosity, is it the same thing in Pakistan? What's the reason for this? I think we should let that question, Rose, I think you should ask that question when we're getting to the case study on Pakistan. And again, from my knowledge, I would not say that it is religiously recognized in Thailand. But that's just me being afraid that I'm saying too much. Yeah. But I think it's a really, really good question, and I think you should ask that in our case study session on Pakistan, because these are really, really interesting questions, especially when it comes to Pakistan, and that's the reason why we have them on board, because it's so conflictual in one's mind about sort of what else you hear from Pakistan. And that's another reason why we actually brought it in, because it's such a positive story as well. This is not about, Al-Qaeda and security and failed states and blah, blah, what have you. This is actually, and you will experience it, it's powerful women who take their lives into their own hands and really own it. I thought there was a question.
If I might just add that at the same time, we may make it sound as if being a transgender woman in Pakistan is a walk in the park, and I'm not sure that is completely in accordance with the reality. But there is a cultural context in Pakistan and in India where the Hijra culture has been highly recognized for centuries. And then there has become, and probably that has to do with colonization and a Christian context being brought in, where the Hijras have become sex workers and very alienated in society. And slowly they're rebuilding a sense of worth and pride and self-esteem, both built on the history going back into Pakistani and Indian culture, and with the concepts that are alive still within the Pakistani society.
Actually, I think it was quite sane that all our three countries, their anti-gay laws all came from the anti-sodomy law that England introduced in their countries when they colonized them, which again I think leads us to our third point, that we shouldn't be too quick on sort of believing what's the right thing for everybody in the world to live by. That was actually something quite. I can't help but feel sort of. I'm half British. I feel horribly responsible for that. Not responsible, but extremely bad about it. Touched upon it, but would you talk about the difference between gender and sex? So the question is, because in Danish
we don't have we have one word for the two, which of course also makes it more difficult to talk about in a more varied way. To me, and I have no idea whether I'm right on this, but how I perceive it is that sex has very much to do with your biology, and gender very much to do with your psychological makeup. So gender is something a lot more cultural. It's something that is within you. It's the gender that you are that you feel is part of your identity, and your gender as perceived is not necessarily in compliance with your biological sex. So that's how it makes sense to me anyway.
Yeah, that's how I understand it as well. I'm not sure if our viewers know this, but we often talk about sort of fluid identities. Should we start thinking of gender as a fluid?
No, I think absolutely. I mean, I do believe that gender is a social construct. It's a cultural construct. That right now we are very binary in our thinking, and that's very much down to, I believe, the Judeo-Christian Muslim tradition of thinking about gender as two inherently different and constant identities. And I think that at the end of the day, if we opened up more if we were more open to different ways of performing gender, we would understand, and we would see that gender cannot be put into brackets in the way that we do right now, where there's such a thing as a real man and a real woman. I think that there are as many ways of performing gender as there are people.
All right, everybody. So this was it for now for this first session. I would just like to say thank you for all of you. For me, sitting at the other end, it's so cool to see that we have people tuning in from Algeria, from Bosnia Herzegovina, from Croatia, from India, from Sweden, Hungary, Denmark. I mean, it's absolutely a thrill. I thought that I really hope that this was good for you, and that you got some good inputs. I know this is sort of introduction, and that we can't sort of really go into Christian things, but I promise you, so next week we're going to talk about international politics and LGBT, and that is going to be really, really interesting. We have an awesome woman coming to speak to you, and then we're going to emerge into the case studies. That is going to be much more sort of specific on the countries, on what's going on in Kenya, what's going on in Uganda, and what's going on in Pakistan, and then we're going to sum it all up in the end. And it's going to be, I really hope that to see you all there, and it's going to be absolutely a thrill. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you, Lars, for coming.
Well, thank you. It's been such a pleasure to get to know a little bit about all of you, and to have this variety of people joining us. Well, I will just say that I really, 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 truly hope to see you in Copenhagen for Pride at some point. Or that you go out.
It's awesome. Like, it was my first Pride. It was the best party ever.
Yeah, he's hooked.
I'm totally hooked.
And that if that won't be the case, then see if there isn't a Pride organization in your own vicinity where you can go and help out. And I would be glad to help you to do this if you can. Probably you can't see this because it's reflecting like a mirror. But maybe you can make it out. My phone number is +45 4110 9414, and my email is lars.henriksen at copenhagenpride.dk. So you can write me there, and
we're going to post this.
That was sort of ridiculous.
But we're going to post it on your group, on Canopy Labs group.
Great.
Yeah.
I'll leave it here with Magnus.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you're enjoying your rest of your Tuesday night, and that you'll have great activity hours on Thursday. All right. See you. Bye.